So you're a millionaire and you want to make sure that the next political candidate in the US who gets elected shares your views and passes laws that favor your business. But how do you do that? After all, giving the politician money in return for favors constitutes bribery and corruption, right? Well, yes, but you can get around that by using something called a super PAC. What is a super PAC, and if it allows for corruption to take place, how does it even exist, let alone it being legal? Well, let me explain. A PAC is a political action committee, which is an organization that collects donations and then funds political campaigns for candidates, legislation, or policies. The only problem with PACs is that your donation amount is limited to a maximum of $5,000, which is better than the $3,300 limit for donating directly to the candidate, but still isn't much if you want to make an influential donation. And this is where super PACs come in. Unlike a PAC, a super PAC doesn't have a maximum donation limit, so you can donate millions or even billions without any legal restrictions. For example, in the 2020 election cycle, super PACs raised a record $3.4 billion, with $2.1 billion of that only coming from the top 100 donors. That's insane! Over 2/3 of all money that was raised came from just 100 donors. So that's it, right? You tell the politician you'll donate to their super PAC in exchange for favors once they get elected. Actually, it's not that simple. There's a bit more to it. To understand what else stands in the way, you have to know how super PACs became legal in the first place. Super PACs are pretty new. They only appeared in 2010, and the reason why is because of 3 major court rulings that changed the laws on election donations, and in one of them, there was an important mistake. The first ruling was all the way back in 1976, Buckley vs. Vallejo, and set limits on how much you can donate to a candidate or a PAC. These are the limits I mentioned earlier. This ruling was made to eliminate quid pro quo, giving something for something in return. So far, there's nothing out of the ordinary. The small limits simply make it difficult to influence anyone. The second ruling happened in 2010 and was Citizens United versus FEC, the Federal Election Commission. And it said that corporations are people and people have free speech, so limiting a corporation's spending to advocate for or against a candidate is an infringement on the free speech of the company. It also stated that if there is no coordination between a corporation and candidates, there is no possibility of the corporation corrupting the candidates. This means that corporations can now spend an unlimited amount of money on campaigning for a politician as long as they're not coordinating with that politician. But remember, there are still limits to donating to PACs, preventing millionaires from funding the PACs with massive amounts of money. But this is where the third ruling comes in. SpeechNow.org versus FEC, which happened just a few months after Citizens United and expanded on it. It said that if non-coordinated spending from corporations have no risk of corrupting the candidate, then neither does the donation to the corporation. And this is where the loophole was created. See, if a PAC does not coordinate with a candidate, there is no risk for your donation to the PAC to corrupt the candidate, which means that, in theory, there is no possibility of quid pro quo, exchanging money for a favor. And because there is apparently no quid pro quo, the first ruling setting limits to prevent quid pro quo does not apply, so you can donate as much as you'd like to the PAC. And these PACs that don't coordinate with candidates and have no donation limits are called super PACs. The path to legal corruption is now clear. All you have to do is tell the politician you'll donate to their super PAC, and in return, once they get elected, they give you a favor. It's essentially quid pro quo, but since the law doesn't consider that something like this is possible, it's completely legal. But wait, how can a politician have their own super PAC if the super PAC is not allowed to coordinate with the candidate? Well, technically, they're not allowed. Super PACs must be independent of the candidate, and there can't be any coordination. But I use the terms independent and coordination quite loosely here, because of course there are ways around it. To begin with, there is no law preventing the candidate's lawyer or even dad from running a super PAC that just so happens to support the candidate. But they still need some communication so that they can be on the same page, and this is where tricks like red boxing come in. Red boxing is where a candidate's campaign communicates indirectly with a super PAC by posting messages in a metaphorical red box on their website. Even though this message is technically public, it's really intended for the super PAC supporting the campaign, which will then fund ads tailored to those specifications. This is a perfect example of red boxing. It tells the super PAC the target demographic, the location to run the ads in, what type of ads to use, and the angle of the ad campaign, all while technically not coordinating with the super PAC. Another way to communicate is through a common vendor. Both the candidate's campaign and the supporting super PAC hire the same media or consulting firm, which creates and runs their ads. The firm, acting as a common vendor, is legally supposed to set up a firewall between the two clients to prevent coordination. In practice, the firewall must be written in a policy statement so that everyone involved can adhere to it and know how to prevent coordination. But even with a firewall, it's difficult to prove that it's being applied correctly, and in fact, there has never been a coordination investigation by the FEC that has resulted in a super PAC being fined. Alright, so now you've got a way to send unlimited amounts of money to an organization that can use loopholes to communicate with the politician the money was meant for. But there's one big problem with this setup. It's not anonymous. The donations the super PAC receives are public, and so if you want to remain unknown, it doesn't really work. If only there was a way to funnel your donation anonymously into a super PAC. A way in which you could donate millions without having your name out there publicly. Well, you're in luck, because you can make use of a 501c4. While this name might sound like if a cat walked along a keyboard, it's an organization that operates for the promotion of social welfare. But they are also allowed to participate in politics as long as politics isn't their primary purpose. If at least 50.1% of the money goes into promoting the welfare of people in communities, the other 49.9% can be spent on politics. And the reason why you choose to funnel money through this organization structure is because this type of organization can collect donations without having to disclose the donors. It's a legal way to stay anonymous while still donating to a super PAC, because while it's public that money came from the 501c4, it's not public who put the money in the 501c4 in the first place. This type of money coming from 501c4s is called dark money, exactly because it's anonymous. Open Secrets estimates that in the 2012 election, at least $333 million of dark money from 501c groups was spent, all without voters knowing where that money came from or what special interests might be pulling the strings. Of course, not all contributions and funding are anonymous, and some actually prefer it to be public. Case in point, Elon Musk. Musk made headlines by promising to give away $1 million a day to a random person in the swing states who is registered to vote and signs a petition tied to a super PAC supporting Trump. And this is a perfect example of millionaires or billionaires finding ways to push the legal framework for political reasons. There's a lot of debate whether what he's doing is legal or not, because it's illegal to pay people or offer them an incentive to either register to vote or cast a ballot. But there's ambiguity in the legality of what he's doing. Musk's super PAC is only asking people to sign a petition for the chance to win $1 million, not explicitly rewarding them for registering to vote. And the petition doesn't require them to be registered Republicans, they just have to be registered. The interesting thing is that depending on whether you look at the news from the right, center, or left, you'll get different stories. The left tends to label Musk's action as vote buying and looks at the implications of financial incentives in politics, while the right is more neutral and talks about the promotional aspect of Musk's campaign and how he's a spokesperson. It's hard to get a balanced view of these actions when different sides of the media present the story through their own political lens. That's why I like to use Ground News when making analyses like this. It's a platform designed to help you cut through the noise and see exactly how stories are being covered across the political spectrum. They show you which stories are being underreported on one side, which ones are being amplified by a side, their factuality, and deeper insights like who owns the news outlets. In a world where political and media manipulation is so prevalent, just as we saw with Musk's news story, tools like this can give you the power to form your own informed opinions, free from bias. If you're interested, there's a link in the description below that will give you 15% off of any subscription. Now, even with the knowledge that platforms like Ground News provide, the political system is still flawed. So how do we fix this? How do we make sure elections are democratic and that it's not a battle between which side has better funding? The answer lies in reforming the very laws that allow super PACs and dark money to flourish. An idea would be to overturn the speechnow.org versus FEC ruling. This would restore limits on how much people can donate, making it harder for the ultra-wealthy to dominate elections. Another option is to require greater transparency for 501c4 organizations, forcing them to disclose their donors. This would shine a light on the dark money that flows into super PACs, making it harder for billionaires to buy influence in secret. On top of these ideas, the FEC should tighten its rules on coordination between super PACs and campaigns. Red boxing and having a common vendor with hard-to-verify firewalls are glaring loopholes that can be closed by clear anti-coordination rules and more rigorous enforcement of these rules. It's crazy to think that super PACs have allowed billionaires to legally buy political influence in a democratic system, all under the guise of free speech. And if the US wants to be called the bastion of democracy, it's imperative that politicians represent primarily the voters, not the donors with the deepest pockets. If you enjoyed this video, YouTube thinks you'll enjoy this video next.